Okay, whenever you're ready.
Hey everybody, I'm Kara Campbell, and I'm an embodiment coach who teaches women how to reconnect to their bodies. I'm starting over, hold on.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Hello, Ron Burgundy. Hey everybody, I'm Kara Campbell. I'm an embodiment coach and I teach women how to reconnect to their bodies and come back home to themselves. And on today's episode, Chase and I talk about how food is an amazing vehicle to come back home to your body. We talk about what it learns to really trust the timing of your life and to be fully in your life. And we talk about how to use food as a way to connect to yourself, to other people, and to the world.
3, 2, 1.
That's how we know it's official.
Yes, official.
Hello, friend.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I figured probably what we're going to talk about a little bit. We get kind of closer maybe to your element.
Yeah.
I've had quite a few of your charcuterie boards up here on the counters.
You have, like one here, one there. Yeah.
I was kind of hoping you would have brought something.
Oh, I honestly should have. It's kind of early for cheese, but
True.
Maybe it's never early for cheese.
Who has charcuterie at 10 a.m.?
Somebody does. Maybe someone in France.
I bet you have.
I have, actually.
I totally would if I was in France. Absolutely.
Yeah. Or like the morning after a party when there's some leftover. You just like pull the board out and keep snacking on it.
But it's so much more than that.
It is.
And I just want to say I'm so glad to finally have this conversation with you on the show.
I feel like we always have this conversation, but now we're just doing it in microphones.
One of my favorite people I've met here in LA, and I'm going to start off by saying I was fascinated. I never thought I would be so fascinated by a charcuterie board making class. I dream about that gold spray.
Oh yeah, the gold glitter.
But just the way that you bring food and people together was so much more than I ever expected.
Oh, thank you.
So first of all, you're very, very good at what you do.
Thank you.
Of food and connection. And I'm assuming that's probably like what you would like to talk the most about today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How did you get into this? How did you make the connection, no pun intended,
between
food and the people in the community and all the things that you work your magic on?
Yeah, I think I learned early on that food was connective by my upbringing. We had dinner every night together as a family, and there's 5 of us kids, and then my parents and my mom every night sat us down for dinner. And I think I learned early on that was a space to reflect and to connect. And so I have all these memories of childhood, and some of those dinners were very awkward and my parents were fighting and some were great. There were so many different dynamics, but it was consistent connection every night where we sat down and we reflected on the day. So when I moved to LA, what was that, 10 years ago, I drove across the country with a best friend and I had no job lined up here. I just kind of on a whim moved across the country.
I feel like that's almost every person I've met.
It's every person's story.
I just sold everything and drove across country.
Totally.
Me.
In hindsight, ignorance was my greatest gift because I had no money. I had no place to stay, but I just was hopeful and kind of like living in ideation. And I drove across the country with a best friend. And she said to me, if money doesn't matter, what do you do with your life? Which I feel like I've been asked that question before. But on that drive, I was like, I would have people over for dinner. That's what I would do. And she was like, cool, you're going to LA. You can do anything in LA. Turn it into a company. So I landed in LA and I went to cocktails actually on my second day here. And I met a director through a friend. And he was like, what are you doing in LA? And I said, well, I'm starting a dinner party company. And he hired me for this dinner. And
well, hold up real quick. So driving across country,
you
get asked this question you've been asked before. Somehow it lands differently. The way you said it right here, I'm sure you had the same amount of clarity then. And then 2 days later, you're already saying it out loud. That's what you do.
Totally.
And then look what happened.
I know.
He's like, all right, let's do it.
It is the power of our words, right?
Wow.
This is something I think about all the time, Chase, is this idea that like what we speak actually becomes life.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that concept back then, but I was just talking out what I wanted to create. And then once you talk it out loud, you kind of have this accountability to actually do it.
Yeah.
And I had been, some of my backstory in Chicago is I was private chefing for this guy. So I had some cooking experience. I knew food well enough to like throw a dinner party.
Sure,
it wasn't out of my skill set, but I kind of formulated on this drive with my best friend this idea of a dinner party company. What does that mean? And in hindsight, when I look at what I answered, having people over for dinner, it was the having people over piece that was important to me.
You
The
started
dinner,
with that.
I
The
started
dinner
with
was
that. And the
secondary.
dinner was the vehicle to have people over, right? So for me, food is the best ever. I love creating. I love having good food. But really, it is about this idea of having people around a table or having people around a cheese board or whatever it might be. Because what happens when we do that is we create the space for actual connection, right? We create the space to have the hard conversation, the good conversation, the intentional conversation. And so I brought that.
Just any conversation.
Any conversation.
Really,
yeah. And I brought that into every dinner party I did. So with all of my dinner parties, or even my cheese board classes or whatnot, I ask an intentional question and I have everyone kind of answer. And what happens in a space like that when you're, whether you're with friends or strangers and you ask an intentional question, is you start mirroring back to each other pieces of yourself. This is just what happens in conversation. And so, I would host a dinner party and we'd ask something silly like, what's the worst date you've been on? And everyone goes around the table and they answer the question. And by the end of the night, you're like, oh, I connect with that person. I understand that. I feel resonant with that. And you're kind of making all these.
I actually was the worst date for that person.
That was my worst date. That guy over there.
This is my worst date.
That would happen in LA, actually. That totally would happen. But yeah, it's a really powerful thing to gather people. And I feel like that is my mission in life, is how do we create spaces of connection? And food is one way to do that. And now I still do that around food, but I think that's kind of the heartbeat of everything I do is what does it look like to create spaces where people feel connected to themselves, then connected to other people, and then connected to the greater whole. And food is kind of universal in all three of those things, where food is our number one vehicle to connect to ourselves.
Oh, sure.
How we eat is everything, right? Like how we eat and nourish our body speaks volumes about how we see ourselves, how we see the world. And then how we eat with other people creates connection with other people. And then I think there's also this global connection that happens when we're ingesting food and we're realizing that we're connected to everything. Yeah.
When you're going about the process of setting up a dinner party for a couple friends, or even like a formal event for what you do for your work, is there like a rhyme and a reason to certain foods are going to stimulate certain conversation? Is there a method to that? Have you found, or have you created a method around that?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a method to it. I feel very, in this chapter of my life, I'm very fascinated by what food does to the body, what certain foods do to the body, how certain foods affect hormones, how certain foods affect our brain, all of that. And so in dinner parties in LA, there were definitely times where I would be hired by a brand or company, and it would need to be like a vegan dinner or a gluten-free dinner or things like that. But I think the way I approach food is, especially if it's my own dinner party or if it's an experience that I'm fully curating, I just want it to feel nourishing.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, I want real food. I want whole food. I want ingredients from the earth. I want a lot of color. I want a lot of vibrancy. And I want you to look at something and be visually stimulated, but also when it goes into your body, I want it to feel really good. So generally I'm cooking pretty clean, right? Like
I can attest to that.
Yeah, pretty clean. Yeah. And I feel like it's part of the energy of how we eat it ends up what's the word? It ends up like helping us figure out how to feel too. So when we eat, we eat in a mindset that we're celebrating and we're excited and we're joyful, our bodies digest things differently than if we're eating it out of stress, right? So if you and I go get cupcakes, and you're eating a cupcake because you had a fight with May, right? And I go get a cupcake because I'm celebrating a job promotion. We eat the same thing, right? But the way the body digests it is different, because if you're in a state of stress, think about your body in stress. Everything closes, right? So your digestion actually closes. So your body's going to hold on to things differently. It's going to digest differently. Whereas if I'm eating in celebration and I'm excited and I'm relaxed and I'm in a space of joy, my body knows how to move things through that it doesn't need to keep. So it's going to move things through in a different way than if I'm sitting in a place of stress and anxiety. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I feel like that's part of the energy I want to bring into food too, is how do we eat from a place of feeling really safe and excited and celebrating the things we're putting in our body?
Yeah. Have you always had that kind of relationship of celebration with food?
Absolutely no.
Yeah. I knew that when I
Absolutely
was
no.
asking the question.
Yeah, absolutely no. I think that's why I get so fiery about it, because my story is one of like very broken relationship with self and with food.
Yeah. Why does this matter so much to you? What's your backstory with this?
Yeah. So my backstory. So I guess I'm trying to think of how I want to tell this story. So when I was 13, my family went through a really traumatic event. My oldest brother had a very terrible experience with drugs. My parents had no idea how to deal. He was the golden child. And so our family kind of fell apart during that time. So two things happened for me. I was 13. I was highly emotionally aware, but I just didn't have an outlet or a space to process emotion. My parents were doing the best they could, but they had 5 kids and they had this son that they were dealing with. And so my coping mechanism became cooking. I was cooking all the time. And it became
that young.
Yeah, that young.
Wow.
I would go in the kitchen and I would bake for hours because it was tactile and it was a form of therapy for me. My mind still to this day when I'm cooking, my mind kind of slows down and I feel like I'm in my body.
Kind of like dropping in.
There. I'm not over analyzing, I'm not processing in my mind. I'm just present, right? So I started cooking a lot. But I also had a lot of messaging about needing to be a certain size and needing to be skinny. And I also grew up in purity culture, so I was taught that the body was bad. So there was a lot of mixed messaging happening where I was loving cooking as a form of therapy, but I was scared of food. I was scared of it making me fat. So I got into a lot of shame cycles around food, around eating certain things, about feeling bad about certain things. And into my 20s, really, really struggled with eating disorders. Oh yeah, into my late 20s, eating disorders, disordered relationship with food. I would go through all kinds of different mindsets around it. And it wasn't until I really started to heal my relationship with myself, with my body, that I feel like I started to understand how interconnected this all is, right? How interconnected it is to be in love and in healthy relationship with your body so that you can feed it well,
right?
So that you can nourish it well. Yeah. Because I was so adamant about counting calories or whatnot, and I wasn't actually present. I wasn't actually in my body and nourishing it in a way that it needed to be nourished from an embodied place.
Okay.
I was doing it from my mind. Like, this is what I should eat or what I shouldn't eat.
Can you explain a little bit more there, like the difference between what your body is telling you maybe it needs and wants versus what your mind is telling you what it needs and wants?
Yeah. So what I see right now with a lot of the clients that I'm working with, a lot of these women who are wanting to come back home to their body, is that they don't trust themselves with food. They've been taught that this diet works, or this is the way to count calories, or they need to, fit their food within a certain window, whatever the mindset is.
Okay.
And they're approaching food from a mind place as opposed to like an embodied, how do I ask my body what it needs?
Interesting.
So we talk about intuitive eating, right? Intuitive eating. And in order to become someone who can intuitively eat, you've got to reconnect to the body in general,
truly,
right?
Yeah,
and you've got to learn to trust yourself, because so many people who end up in,
you have to almost relearn.
You have to relearn completely in order to be able to eat in a way that is intuitive. You have to trust that you know what you need, right? So a lot of times when we come into relationship with food, we don't trust that we know what we need. I didn't trust that my body knew what it needed. I thought my mind had to tell me like, this is the healthy choice, right?
It's almost like you first have to know what you need and then trust that you're going to oblige that.
Yeah. Yep. And so there is a mind aspect to it, right? We can learn like sweet potatoes are really good for us, and we can learn these things that are actually nourishing. But again, it's asking the body. It's saying like, what do you need right now? And what's so powerful is the body is always speaking to us. You've probably read it. The body keeps the score.
Yeah.
We know that the body cannot lie. It cannot lie. The mind can lie all the time. The mind can be tricked and be confused. The body is always telling us the truth. But in order to know that and to act from that place, we actually have to learn the signals of the body.
Like what? What are some of the signals? What were some of your signals?
Yeah, some of my signals. Well, I'll tell you, one of my huge wake-up moments was around hormones, actually.
Okay.
So I had like crazy mood swings, crazy PMS. No one ever taught me that could be hormones, right? So I was constantly at war with my body, thinking my body was fighting against me when it would show up with like hormonal acne or if I would like get really PMSy and moody, I thought, wow, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body. Instead of thinking, wow, my body's trying to communicate something right now.
Wow. What a powerful switch.
Right? Like my body's trying to tell me what's going on. And the only way my body knows how to do that is to break out, right? But I spent so much time getting angry at my body, like, stop doing that, instead of having this really gentle, compassionate approach, like, what are you trying to communicate right now? You're maybe trying to communicate to me that you don't really do well on dairy, right? So when I started to learn about hormones and food, those were some major signals for me. And again, there was a mind aspect to it. But for me, it became a process of actually learning to listen to everything that my body was speaking.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. As you were talking, I was thinking back to certain things that when I was going through, I guess you could call it diet culture.
Yeah.
Truly living by, I have to count my calories, I have to get my macros, have to do this, have to do that.
Yep.
And thinking, because I see other people having, I think, the results that I want, and then just accepting what my body has to go through in order to achieve something similar. I'm sure so many people are just nodding their head like, yep, absolutely. But then when I think to over the many years of shifting out of that, and just dropping into what my body actually needs, actually wants, and honestly just trying a lot of different things, and then finally paying attention to what I don't have to endure, what I don't have to suffer through in terms of maybe some inflammation, maybe some skin issues, maybe some bloating, maybe some constipation, maybe a lot of things. That for me was like pivotal. We'll go with that. Pivotable, indubitably. And actually paying attention to what my body needed, and then kind of building my own protocol around that, and then building the end result that I wanted.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, if my body feels the best, it looks the best, or it just feels more in alignment with my actions and, how it performs every day, then what goal can I build out of that? Because obviously that's going to be more long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that you referenced diet culture too, because I think about that in our country, and it's what, a $95 billion industry, something like that?
At least.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And what happens is we are told all day, every day that somebody else knows better, that somebody else knows our body better than us. And the truth is, no one can know your body better than you. No one can know what you need except for you.
Yeah.
But we're not taught that, right? So some of this journey of coming back home to the body and really listening to the body is changing the mindset around that.
Truly, yeah.
And understanding that we are so bio-individual, that each of our bodies need very drastically different things. There was a book that just came out about intermittent fasting. Did you see this?
Which one?
I think it's Dr. Will Cole.
Oh, yeah, he's making some rounds now.
He is.
Yeah,
he's making some rounds.
He's on a hard tour right now.
He launched that book, Intermittent Fasting, which again, I respect so much of his work. I think he's incredible. But even the title of that book gave me so much anxiety, because it's this idea that, intuitive fasting, not intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Intuitive fasting.
Yes.
Sorry, wrong title. So he called it intuitive fasting, and it gave me anxiety because fasting is a spiritual practice. It's a beautiful thing. But when we call it intuitive fasting, what we are communicating in my mind is that starve yourself, but do it intuitively. Right?
Yeah, like, what does that even mean?
Don't eat, but do it intuitively. And as a woman who's very protective of women in diet culture, I'm like, this messaging it's destructive. And also, all of these ways of eating, keto, intermittent fasting, any kind of diet, it doesn't work for everybody, right? It doesn't work for every single body. And so what it does in my mind is it teaches us that, again, we can't trust ourselves. Again, that we need to lean on somebody else's wisdom to tell us how and what to eat.
Or there's something wrong with me, something wrong with my body.
Yep.
I've been there. I'm sure so many people listening have tried this, tried that, and then it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And then you're like, well, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a crazy industry. It makes me crazy. Like, how do we teach people to trust themselves with their bodies? How do we teach them how to nourish themselves well? And sometimes when I think about the body, I think about this idea, like, we know when we're connected to something and we know when we're disconnected to something, right? So when you're in relationship with May, if you guys are in a fight, there's a disconnection happening.
Oh, absolutely.
You're agitated with each other. You're annoyed with each other. You're like, feisty, and
it's a good word for it.
Feisty.
Yeah.
And it's the same with our bodies. Like when we're in disconnection with our bodies, we're constantly critical. We're picking on something. We're kind of like, oh, why do you have cellulite or whatever it is, right? That's disconnection. But when we're connected, when you're connected with May, it's like you're in love and you're having fun and it's joyful and you're like supporting each other and it's helpful. And I feel the same way when we're in good relationship with the body.
Yeah, yeah.
We're kind and we're gentle and we're compassionate and we speak nicely to it and we ask, right? We actually ask, like, what do you need? What do you need?
Is that kind of like your back door to healing relationships with food, healing relationships with the self and other people, kind of priming people to get into that mindset of just a more positive communication protocol, I guess, and how you bring people together through food and conversation. It really does, in my personal experience, it opens people up in a way to become a little bit more vulnerable, to honestly just think and talk and act through a lens of positivity and engagement. Is that intentional and kind of like, so really we're starting with conversation, but your end goal is more so the bond people have with food or vice versa? Or
I think it's a little of all of that.
Okay.
I think when I think about my work, I just think about the word connection, right? Like I want you to feel connected. I think about that on the daily. Like what does it look like for each of us to feel a little more connected to our life? And by connected, I mean here, present, in the moment. So in food work, like in a dinner party setting, what I'm doing is I'm getting you present. I'm getting you in conversation with other people. Yeah. I'm getting you here in the moment, enjoying something beautiful, ingesting something beautiful, connecting with all the humans around you. But it's also connecting you to yourself, right? And I kind of think of connection actually in this triangle. Like I said it a little bit earlier, but this 3-part way of connection of like connection to self, connection to others, and connection to the world.
Right.
And how they all feed off of each other. And how we kind of live in this what's the word for that? Triad of connection. Yeah. And I think food kind of lives inside the middle of that, where we can kind of work around this triad around a table of food, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. And I kind of was wondering how you would answer that, because which one does she do first? Is it the food? Is it the connection? But I have a feeling it's all the things.
Yeah.
And then it's like truly just what are we working around?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you think that has such a powerful connection mechanism as food?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I do. I think food is so powerful. It's a vehicle, right? It's just a vehicle for existing together and with ourselves. I even think food is a meditative practice. For me, I wake up every morning and I ask myself, like, how can I make breakfast a meditative experience? How can I slow down, create something really nourishing and beautiful for myself? How can I sit with it and thank it for like moving through my body? Sometimes, Chase, I think about food. this is like
I think about food a lot too.
I think about it all day. But I think about it how literally we eat a piece of bread and it turns to energy. Like our bodies are flipping crazy. Yeah. That we can eat something and it digests through our system into energy, which is so when I just
like micro super subcellular level stuff
into our blood.
Yeah.
It's wild to me.
It's nuts.
Yeah. And so I think it's something we're not super connected to anymore. None of us are farming. I would like to be farming. I want to get chickens actually in Nashville.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I really want them.
I see that for you.
Right?
I see that for you, yeah.
I'm going to name them. We'll name one Chase. Chase, Harry.
And that's Harry Chase.
Harry Chase. Yes, absolutely. But we're not super connected to our food anymore, right?
Right, yeah.
We don't handle it. We don't create it in the same way. And I think when we can slow down and kind of have this gratitude experience around it, even for 5 minutes, even to make a piece of toast and make it really beautiful and just say like, thank you for turning into energy. Yeah. We're shifting things, right? We're shifting the way our brain processes how we eat. We're shifting our gratitude shifts everything. So when we're grateful for the thing that's coming in, it's shifting the way we digest it. Yeah. So I think there's like such beauty in allowing food to be this vehicle for so much more in our lives.
How do you, or I guess I'm going to go backtrack a little bit. What was your kind of initial steps to truly healing your relationship with food? Was it just that kind of choosing to show up
Yeah.
with an intention,
Yeah.
to kind of like not let the food give you the feeling, but rather you the other way around?
Yeah, I love this question. I think that my first memory of shifting things was actually body work, like a somatic practice.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I have been in talk therapy most of my life since I was 18. I love it. I think therapy is amazing. But talk therapy takes us so far, right? And what we know now is that trauma, anything really, any kind of capital T trauma, little t trauma is stored in the body, right? It's stored in the fascia. And in order to move that out, we have to do physical release things, right? We can't just move out trauma or pain.
Trauma be gone.
Yeah, we can't do it here. And for so long, I was trying to do it here. I was analyzing, I was journaling, I was processing, like, why am I in bad relationship with food? Why can't I fix myself?
Which I'm sure gave you some
Oh,
relief.
I
It
could
gave
tell
you
you
some steps.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah,
It gave me steps. It gave me a lot of, it gave me a lot of knowledge.
But you knew there was more.
Yes. And this is why I get so passionate about embodiment, because the mind needs to drop into the body, right? That phrase of dropping in, there needs to be this integration, and embodiment really is that. It's this alignment of our mind, bodies, and our souls working in conjunction together. And so for me, I think it was probably the first time I did breath work, actually, that I felt something shift off me.
Wow.
Yeah. Something just
What was it?
leave. I can't even describe what it was. It was like
A sensation, though.
a sensation of some kind of hard energy leaving my body. I felt like, whoa, like that something left.
Like let go of you. Wow.
And again, I had done so much mind work up until then, so I really had an understanding of like I don't like myself. I'm not in a good relationship with myself. I want to fix that.
And are those common kind of mindsets? Are those common
Oh my gosh.
descriptors
Absolutely.
for where you were and where you think a lot of people are?
Where a lot of people are. Yeah. I had a conversation with a girlfriend last week who is so confident, so beautiful, so powerful. You would think she's like in love with her life. And in some ways she is. But she made a comment. She was like, if you knew the inner voice inside of my head and how I speak to myself.
Wow.
And I think a lot of women and men, but I work mostly with women. I think a lot of women really feel that, really feel like there's something they need to fix about themselves. And I think we're taught that.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
In
Like
terms of their relationship with food and body image and all that stuff,
Yeah, there's this beautiful quote, and I'm going to botch it, but it's this idea that women grow up being taught that their bodies are an endless fixing project, while men grow up thinking that their bodies are something to master and tackle, right? And so I feel like women kind of grow up with this messaging of it's never enough. We're never enough. We're never something enough. Our boobs are never big enough, or we're never skinny enough, something enough. And so a lot of this work is coming back into this place of I'm enough, right? And we can do that sometimes in the mind. I think the mind helps, like the talk therapy helps around that.
Sure, yeah.
But what I see be really powerful for women is when we can move any of that stuck energy. So some of that is breath work. Some of that is just movement. I've been practicing nonlinear movement. Do you know what that is?
No, what's that?
So it's this idea of just allowing your body to move however it needs to move.
Okay.
So I'll put
like
on
ecstatic dance almost?
like ecstatic dance. Yeah. So I'll put on a song for 10 minutes and I will just ask like, body, how do you want to move? And
Interesting.
sometimes I'm shaking. Sometimes I'm just like wobbling in the mirror. But it's relearning. It's relearning. It's a relearning to ask the body again, asking the body like, what do you need? How do you want to move right now? What will help you move anything that's stuck? And nonlinear movement is just this reawakening of how to connect, how to feel connected and feel in your body.
And so that gave you next steps beyond a lot of the mind work you were doing and various therapies and journaling.
Yep.
That actually you found was the next step that was necessary to finally let go of these poor associations.
Yeah, and to release mindsets and release energy that wasn't serving me.
Yeah.
To release things that were really damaging for me. And I had this one experience in my late 20s where I had gone through like a terrible food episode. I had gone on like a binge or something and I felt so guilty and I was like in this shame spiral. I was like, why do I keep doing this to myself? And I was laying on the floor and I actually had a panic attack. And I called a friend and I was like, please just stay on the phone with me. And it was my first panic attack in a long, long time.
Wow.
I'd had one in my earlier 20s, but laying on the floor, and she stayed on the phone with me for like 30 minutes. And then when we got off the phone, I heard this voice, and it was like an internal voice. And the voice said, "I'm sorry this is happening to you."
Wow, no way.
And I it's so vivid for me, Chase, because I think I had thought I was doing that to myself, right? I think I thought I didn't have enough willpower. I was self-sabotaging. I was whatever I was doing. And when I heard that voice, like, "I'm sorry this is happening to you," it made me realize that this wasn't me, right?
Yeah.
This was something else. This was something.
It wasn't, "I'm sorry you're doing this to yourself."
Yeah. I'm sorry this
It's
is
almost as
happening
if
to you.
fair to say like you were a victim of something.
Yeah. And I think about like Maston Kipp's quote where he says, there's no such thing as self-sabotage. There's only self-protection.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Right? There's no such thing as self-sabotage. There's only self-protection. And how so often we think we're sabotaging, but really what we're doing is we're protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
So any of these,
There's so much more grace in that statement.
so much more grace.
Yeah.
And you know this, like compassion leads to healing, not aggression and shame.
Truly.
Those things don't lead to healing. So when we can reframe something and say like, wow, I'm not sabotaging. What am I, instead if I'm self-protecting, like what am I protecting myself from? Then I can go heal that. Then I can go say like, oh, I actually don't need to protect myself right now.
Right.
Actually, I'm safe. I can do the work to heal my little girl, Kara, and actually make her feel safe enough so that these sideways behaviors of, binging or starving or whatever destructive behaviors are happening, they kind of fall away when we do the work to heal the thing that we're protecting from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In your work, did you find that a lot of it or some of it, any of it, how much of it, I guess is the question, was related to the religious aspects? You mentioned growing up in purity culture, and I know that about your history. And I can think back to, I grew up in Southern Baptist and religious household, and
you guys started purity culture, Southern Baptist.
Oh, damn. All right.
Damn it.
I got to backtrack on some of that. But I'm trying to think back really specifically on like associations to food, events around food, and even just in like, youth group, how we would have certain foods and certain events. I'm trying to go back to like, what was the angle? Because me as a young guy, I'm sure there were things that I absolutely didn't see. When we'd have like ice cream socials or go after witnessing, we would go out and always get ice cream and all these things. And I, as I'm just talking about this, I think back to like the guys, me especially, like just getting all the toppings, all the ice cream, all the things, and a lot of the girls not.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, why was nobody being aware of what was serving the variety in the group? What was the contribution in religion and purity culture and your personal experience to what you chose to eat, what you didn't choose to eat, and your relationship around that?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I grew up in like hardcore purity culture, hardcore, and I had like the promise ring, like true love waits. Yeah. I signed the pledge at my youth group, like summer camp or something.
I remember those.
Right, the full pledge. So what's interesting about purity culture is it rests on the idea that the body is bad and sinful. Like we are inherently bad and sinful.
Man is inherently wrong.
Yeah.
Evil.
And we need a savior, right? Like even how we think about evangelicalism right now, there's this idea that we need a savior to save us from our sinful selves, right? So purity culture came out in the 90s, the early 90s.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And it was started by the Southern Baptist Convention or Southern Baptist Church. And they started the True Love Waits movement.
That's right. I remember. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And that spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
There's a ton of amazing history. If you want a book about it, Pure by Linda K. Klein is like so fascinating. But what happened is we started teaching that, again, the body is bad and that, that we need to protect our purity at all costs. And purity was defined as not having sex before marriage, right?
Yeah.
So you could be, as a woman, you could be a liar, a cheater, a stealer, a horrible person. But if you didn't have sex until you were married, you were still pure, right? So it put this binary perspective on purity as impure is
There's
having
one
sex.
thing that's right and one thing that's
having
wrong.
Sex before marriage. Purity is not having sex before marriage. So in that messaging, what happened is that we were taught as women that it was our job to protect men, right? So we couldn't wear
How
skirts.
so?
We couldn't wear
Oh,
skirts that were
yeah,
too
right.
short.
Yeah, yeah.
We couldn't like show our boobs. Don't cause men to stumble.
Because we have no control. And if we
Exactly.
lose control, then it's the woman's fault.
It's the woman's
Yeah,
fault.
yeah.
It's very Garden of Eden. Like Eve caused Adam to stumble. So there was a lot of really, really destructive messaging that women had the power to cause men to stumble. And also in purity culture, I'm giving you some context so I can go into the body.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
also in purity culture, women were taught that men were in charge of the household, right? So men, we submit to the husband. We first submit to God, then we submit to our fathers. Then once we get married, we submit to our husband, right? So women in that time felt very out of control. Women were taught that they had no control. So if we are taught that we don't have agency and we don't have control, what happens? We project it onto our bodies, right? So all of a sudden, women started controlling their bodies, started getting very controlling about what went into their bodies, how to keep their bodies thin or small. Another part of the messaging is that, again, the body is bad. So if the body is bad, if you feel bad, what do you punish? You punish the thing that is bad. So
Right,
you punish
yeah,
the body,
yeah.
right? So you end up with a lot of women who end up at punishing their bodies, whether that be starving them or binging and hurting them. So it created, I think purity culture, we're just really starting to do the research around this, but purity culture created horrible, horrible messaging for women around their bodies. Every single woman I've worked with thus far who has a background in purity culture has
Really?
is healing a destructive relationship with
Wow,
food. Yeah.
wow.
And again, if the body's bad, you can't trust it. Right? So if your body is bad and sinful, you're not going to trust the way that it communicates with you. You're not going to trust that like it's telling you something and it's being honest. You're going to fight against it and war against it. So I actually get very like aggressively angry about purity culture. I think it's one of the worst things that ever happened in religion. And like it's so destructive. It's so damaging.
Do you think it was so damaging? Was it damaging to the extent that it drives a wedge between people and higher power, people and their faith, women specifically?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in my late 20s when I healed my relationship with my body, I also at the same time was going through this massive internal belief shift around God. And I it's so funny looking back. I'm reminiscing on this as I'm saying it out loud. I didn't believe that God was good.
Wow.
I thought he was like an angry, vindictive, like strike you down God.
I'm assuming because of what like you were struggling with the body of like, why would this God want me to do these things to myself?
Totally.
Right?
Totally. And I felt like I was constantly repenting, right? Like constantly forgive me. When in actuality, like I was created as a good, perfect human. And I think that
In his image, right?
in his image. And I think a lot of this theology around like I'm a sinner saved by grace is so bad. It's so bad. It's just not accurate. And yet it's mainstream messaging that kind of threads its way through Christianity.
Right, yeah.
And it does drive a wedge, right? Like if you believe that God is angry with you, like why do you want to know God?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Truly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it has definitely been destructive and caused this wedge.
Where are you now with your relationship to food, your embodiment with food,
Yeah.
and your whole connection to it, with it, around it?
Yeah. Where am I now with it? I think you and I were talking about this the other day, but I think where I'm at now is that everything is connected. Everything is connected. And that sounds so simple, but this idea that the way we eat is a spiritual practice.
Yeah,
And the way we speak with one another is a spiritual practice. And I'm not separate from any living thing. Like I am a part of living things. And I think my relationship with food is kind of more expansive because I see it as part of my existence on the earth, like part of my practice on the earth.
Where do you see people struggling most present day? Because I know this is in a lot of the work that you do with clientele and your content and your books and your experiences. What maybe is something that you try to remedy the most these days in terms of food and even diet culture a little bit?
Yeah. I think the big thing is is asking the question of how do we come back home to ourselves? Like how do
well
we,
said. Well said.
yeah, like how do we come back? And many of us have lived so far from our bodies, right? We've lived out here in our minds. We've existed really in this mind space. And that's culturally acceptable too. It's probably practiced more culturally than we'd like to admit. And so now I think in my work, I'm asking this question of how do we teach people to come back home, to really come back to this place of existing fully present in the here and now, in the bodies we're in, loving the bodies we're in. I the week before I met Caleb, so I did a lot of healing work in my late 20s and then into my early 30s. You know this, but I was the girl who thought I'd get married at 25.
Yeah.
And I got married at 35.
Yeah.
And so those 10 years of singleness were really transformative for me because again, I had to let go of the expectations of what my life I thought it should look like. And it didn't look that way.
Yeah. How many of us do that, right?
Right?
Yeah. Both hands over here.
I know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's a constant grieving in some ways, right? Like a constant grieving of what we thought it should look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in order to actually allow what we desire, we have to let go of those expectations so that source, God, universe can give us what we truly want. So the week before I met Caleb, I had this experience. I was in Nashville and I was sitting on a back porch with a friend. And I said to her, I feel so connected to my life. And it was one of those moments, I'm sure you've had one, but where you're so there that nothing else matters. Yeah. You don't want to be anywhere else. You're not thinking about anything else. You're not planning for your future or regretting your past. You're just fully there.
It's like every variable of your life is in flow.
Yeah.
It's just, it's no more or less than it needs to be or should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I had this experience of, there I am. I don't want to be anywhere else. And 3 days later, I meet Caleb, which again is interesting to me because I think there's something very powerful that happens when we integrate and when we connect and when we get fully present. It's almost like we open up space for the things that we desire to come
absolutely,
in. Right? Like we open up a portal even for what we long for to come in.
Because to your point, I mean, at this point, the mind and the body are finally in alignment. The mind is allowing things to happen. Like, you're not forcing the mind to try to make the body do something that you think it should do.
Yeah.
You know, you're tapping into the body and the mind, and both are able to fully exist and let you know, like, more of this, less of that, or we're good.
Yeah. And I'm also not in my mind thinking like, man, I should be married by now.
Right.
Man, I wish I wouldn't have broken up with that guy. Man, maybe I missed my chance here. I'm not in my mind regretting and spinning around the decisions that I've made or not made. I'm just there. Right? I'm just there accepting my life as it is fully right now. And then I open up the space. I create the space really for the thing that I long for to come in. And in hindsight, I think, I mean, this is probably all of our stories, but in hindsight, I couldn't have met him a day earlier. Right? Like it just wouldn't have worked. It would not have worked. And I'm so grateful now. So what I find even working in with women around food is there is a massive connection with the relationship too. There's a massive connection around body and dating. And I've joked, my title is like an embodiment coach, but I've been like, maybe I should just be a dating coach because that's what we end up working on all the time.
Right. I can imagine. Yeah. It gets to that.
Yeah. Because there is this sense of when you come back home to yourself, when you get embodied, you attract the things that are for you. But if you're out of your body constantly wishing you were somewhere else or wishing you had something else, you're not attracting, right?
Right. Yeah.
I was just you're going to love this. I feel like maybe you know this, but I was in a conversation with a friend in Florida and she had just gotten back from Joe Dispenza's like meditation weekend.
Yeah.
And we are talking about energy and manifestation and all these things and these terms that we throw around and are so powerful. But we were talking about how the human body has a magnetic charge.
Right.
So we're positive at our head, we're negative at our feet, right? We have a magnetic charge. Yeah. When we are in fight or flight, when we are in stress, our energy goes like this, whoosh, and it comes here. So we no longer have a magnetic charge. We're not attracting, right? So when we think about the idea of manifestation, we have to be out of fight or flight. We have to be in a place of presence and acceptance. And when we are, I'm using my hands to like show you, but when we're in this place of openness and receiving, then we're actually attracting the things that we want. Then energetically, we are like pulling in what we want. Yeah. But if we're always in this place, and again, I do this like tightness. Even when we talked about the cupcakes, right? The
Yeah,
stress,
yeah.
like everything closes. We can't actually invite in what we desire. So this idea of coming back home to the body, of being here now, existing in the present, is actually what pulls in the future, right? It actually is
Wow.
what energetically pulls in
Wow.
what we long for. But we spend a lot of time being like this, stressing, thinking, over analyzing. How do I get? Protecting. How do I get? As opposed to being like, how do I allow? How do I just allow? Yeah.
Besides getting your wonderful, amazing husband through all of this work,
The
what are
best.
some other things that you can like put a finger on as to, because of my embodiment work, because of my relationship growth with food and connection to the whole process, it helped me with this, that it, maybe, helped with weight gain, weight loss, clear something up? What were some more maybe like physical, tangible things that you can kind of put a finger on?
Absolutely. Great question. Weight, absolutely. My weight stabilized is
Okay.
what happened.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not like the thinnest I've ever been, but I feel in my body. I feel like this is the body I'm meant to be in, right?
Like comfortable in your own skin.
Comfortable,
Yeah, yeah.
comfortable. And I mean, I eat whatever I want. I don't think about it anymore. I used to count literally everything.
Oh yeah, gram for gram, same.
Gram for gram,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
measuring.
Yeah.
And now I just eat how I want to eat, and my body responds because I'm gentle with it, So weight, I think, was a really interesting one for me. And I see that with the women I'm working with too. It's
I'm sure.
crazy. Girls that will be on crazy diets, restricting. And then when they get a little more free and they give themselves a little bit more of what they need, their body actually lets go,
Yeah.
right? It lets go of what it doesn't need. So weight for me, I think my career shifted a lot when I got embodied.
Interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I became much more confident. I started attracting the clients that I wanted. I started, drawing in the kind of work that I want to do.
Wow.
And I think that my ability to know what I wanted career-wise shifted too.
Like actual clarity around
Clarity.
your future.
Clarity. Yeah, one of the programs I'm doing with women right now, we talk about how embodiment, essentially what it does, it helps you reconnect to your body. It helps you get clarity on what you want, and it makes space for healthy relationships. Like those are the kind of three pillars that I see happen consistently with people. So for me, body, weight, career, and then relationships too. I have gone through, probably in the past 5 years, I've gotten narrower on my inner circle, and I have deepened the relationships that matter and let the ones that aren't serving kind of fall away.
Yeah.
So I feel like
Absolutely.
clarity in relationships, clarity in work, clarity in body.
Outside of the body, outside of maybe a lot of the more typical reasons people try to work on their relationship to food, gaining weight, losing weight, stabilizing weight, less of the physicality stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you see embodiment in food relationships? Where do you see that spilling over the most, that people might be the most surprised about? You're kind of talking about, relationships and your profession and stuff, but where maybe could someone think of, like right now, they have a stressor in their life, a big friction item, a problem, whatever. Where maybe you think they could actually work on their relationship with food, or like their body relationship that could spill over into that they might not even think about?
Yeah. Well, I think that what happens, I kind of referenced this, but I think that what happens when we come back home to the body is we get fully present, right? Like we get here and now. And I think that anything that is a stressor, anything that is confusing, anything that we are stuck up here in our minds about, when we get into the body is our wisest teacher. So it teaches us about everything. And I think too, there's this sense of when we get back into the body, that's when we're really listening to our intuition, right? That's when we actually are connected to our intuition. And sometimes we think about intuition as like just in the gut or something, but I think it's this whole body experience of, I know how to move forward in this situation. I know how to act in this situation. And this, like everyone who has had a gut instinct and they can recognize, like, that's my intuition. It's always right. I've never, ever had someone tell me that their intuition has been wrong, ever.
What's up with that, by the way?
Right?
Why are you so smart?
You're so smart. Second brain, but actual first brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's this reality that embodiment actually affects everything. Because if you're dialed in to your intuition, you know the answer for everything in your life. You don't need someone else to tell you how to eat, what to do in that work situation, what to do in that relationship. Your body knows. So to answer your question, I think it helps with literally everything.
Sure. Yeah.
It transforms the way you do life because it drops you into a different kind of living, into a different flow of living, into a different brain of living.
Where are you most hopeful for your relationship with food, your embodiment process? Where are you most hopeful for it to take you here and now or in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I hope for, I heard this quote today. I'm going to see if I can remember the actual phrasing. She said, we long for what we yearn to provide.
Say that again.
We long for what we yearn to provide. So I heard it, and then I started thinking about my own life. Like, what have I longed for? And where in that longing do I actually yearn to provide something for other people, right? So all the healing we do, all the work we do on ourselves, it really is for other people, right? Like it's for us, but it's for the elevation and the expansion of other humans. So if I work on me, then I now have tools and processes to help other people work on them.
Yeah.
So when she said this, we long for what we yearn to provide, I kept thinking about how I used to long to feel connected to my life and I felt disconnected. I used to long to be in a loving marriage and I felt so far from that. I used to long to like my body. And all of those things I longed for, I did, right? Like I did the work and I did the things to like invite those things in.
Yeah.
Now I feel very connected to my life. I'm obsessively in love with my husband and I love my body, right?
Yeah.
So now I want to provide that for other people. And that's where I get hopeful is that these things that we want, they're available to us. I think about this one woman who I finished like a 6-month program with, and she came in like really longing to trust herself. And by the end, to see her be able to do that and how trusting herself transformed her relationship with food, transformed her relationships, it transformed everything. That's where I get really hopeful is that this is available to everybody.
Truly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's available to anyone who longs for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What has been, to kind of your last example with this client, what has been some of the biggest ahas or surprises to someone who goes into this process to heal their relationship with food in their bodies to what actually happens? Is the goal going in the same that it is coming out?
Yeah. I think the goal gets expanded probably.
Okay.
With that specific client, she came in literally just saying, I want to trust myself. There was no reference of food. About 4 months in, we got real into food because she didn't even see the connection of it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Most of us, you don't see the thing that you actually need to work on.
Yeah. So by 4 months in, we're like, oh, there it is. Yeah. And when we unpack that and we break down some of that, then the trusting yourself, it just starts to flow. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like the goal definitely expands for people.
What do you think are some ways someone might, let's make an assumption that the person listening right now is, I've got a pretty good relationship with food. I'm pretty happy with my body. Yeah, sure. I mean, everybody I think would prefer maybe 1 or 2 things to be like a little bit better or whatever. What are some ways that we might think we have a very positive relationship to food in our bodies that might be another form of protection like we're talking about before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if there's any sense of control, like,
yes.
If there's any sense of control, I think there's more room for radical self-acceptance.
Control how? Expand on that, please.
Control like any kind of counting is control, right? Any kind, and again, this is not
any kind of like keeping tabs on something.
Yeah. And this is not a bashing against someone who's, counting their macros so they can achieve a certain something. But I think that we have really learned to trust the mind, trust the mind around the body. And for me, I think there's elements of control in that. Like, what does it look like to actually have no need to control my life or control my body? What does it look like?
What a powerful question to ask yourself. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what does it look like to fully trust that God's source universe is for me? And because I know that so confidently, I can just exist. And I can know that the things that are for me are coming for me and I'm not going to miss them. And I don't have to control, even down to the minute thing of food. Like I don't have to control what goes in my body.
Mm-hmm.
I can eat that piece of pizza if I really want it. And if I don't want it, I don't have to eat it. So yeah,
Well,
I think
I always want to eat the pizza.
always.
Full disclosure.
I always want the pizza. I literally always want the pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that it really comes down to a question of control. And we probably all have so many layers of control that we don't even know.
Oh, if you just ask yourself that question right now, what am I controlling in my life? What am I keeping tabs on? Like I said earlier, there's got to be one or two things that come to mind.
Yeah. And there's a difference between control and responsibility.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there's ways to be responsible. Just because being not in control is not the same as being out of control, right? So if I'm not controlling, it doesn't mean all of a sudden I'm out of control. It used to mean that.
Exactly.
It used to mean
Thank
that
you
for
for
me
saying
in
that.
food.
Yeah.
It used to mean like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have no Oreos or I'm going to have 27 Oreos, right? I'm going to go out of control with Oreos.
It doesn't have to be one extremity or another.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
What is that balance in the middle of I'm just existing with like trust and self-trust?
Another question comes to mind. I could keep you here all day. I'm going to keep a look at the time. One other question comes to mind, and kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation around community and connection and conversation. Again, speaking from experience, a lot of the events that I've done with you, you walk away, the person that came with my wife, that relationship kind of gets you pondering. You start thinking about different things, but then also it stirs up other things with acquaintances and brand new people.
Yeah.
So how could someone listening right now take a look at their relationship, let's say with their significant other, their husband, a coworker, a roommate, whatever, and there's something that they want to mend. There's something they want to, or maybe they just want to, I just want to get deeper with you. I want to get to finally know you a little bit more, or maybe I just want to open up myself to an experience that's going to get me to know me more.
Yeah.
How could they start with that but use food?
Ooh.
What are some ways you would recommend?
Yeah. Well, one way that we talked about earlier is just intentional questions over a meal. And those can be so simple. Like, what's the game? We're not really strangers.
Oh my God, I love that.
It's the best. There's so many good questions that we can be asking and we can be asking ourselves too. And again, I said this earlier, but this idea of like a meditative breakfast for me is a space to ask myself, like, how are you doing? Like, how are you going to show up today? How are you? Is there anything we need to talk, like with my body? Is there anything we need to talk about? Is there anything that we need to process? And in the same way in a marriage where we need to create spaces to do that, to do our like check-ins and like, how are we doing? Because sometimes even with our relationship with our body, we're hustling, we're busy, we're doing so many things and we're not slowing down enough to say like, how are you doing? How are we doing?
Which in a way is kind of an assumption. And those have come to bite me in the ass a few times. Yeah.
You just assume things are
just because
okay.
You're not in an argument or you're not talking about something for X amount of days or weeks or whatever doesn't always mean that everything is good or there isn't need for a question like that.
Yeah. And I think even if Caleb and I are the best friends in the world and we're having a great time and we're in love, he is a human. He is an endless universe of possibility for me to know.
Yeah.
So we cannot exhaust our knowing of ourselves and we cannot exhaust our knowing of each other.
Yeah.
And so I think even asking that question of like, how can I mend or how can I connect deeper? Even having that curiosity prompts us to say like, maybe around this meal, I'm going to dig into this area.
Yeah.
I'm going to dig into this space of Chase, I want to know this about you. Or I want to know what you're thinking about the next 5 years of your life or whatever it might be. Just kind of asking these questions that allow us to go deeper. And the fun element about the food aspect is that when you create something for someone, there's a massive energy exchange.
Yes.
So if I cook you a meal,
it's
an energy exchange.
Yeah.
I'm gifting you something from myself.
Yeah.
And there's power in that. There's power because there's a safety created and there is an instant connection created just by sharing something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And kind of secondary question to that before get kind of towards the end here. What are some foods that you would recommend somebody could go to that you have found to be the most, I guess, powerful is the word, just maybe rooted foods, vibrant foods? What are
Yeah.
some immediate foods people could tap into that just allow the body to really just like pull everything out of it just to feel its best? Like just
Yeah.
your top maybe high quality fun foods.
Yeah, I think again we're so bio individual, so the way we feel on certain food is different. But I think of food that is the cleanest. Like what
Okay.
is the most organic, vibrant, in season?
Yeah.
In
In season's huge.
in
Absolutely.
season, yeah. Anti-inflammatory thing I can put in my body, right? And again, I eat pizza all the time, so I'm not like constantly eating like this.
But you also make amazing pizza.
Oh, that pizza
Seriously,
was so good that we made.
unreal.
Oh my
like
gosh.
the dough, the everything. Like, oh my God.
And that's too hand making,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like hand making dough
Yeah.
is amazing. And there's something energetic in that. Anyways, so vibrant foods, I could talk all day. I think of like things, for me, I think of things like avocado. It's rich. It's like healthy. It makes me feel good. I think I said this earlier, sweet potatoes. I think of, I love, this is like so up for grabs, but I love bread.
You do.
I love bread.
You do.
I love it. I feel
Yeah.
okay on it. I know that a lot of people don't. So that's one for me. I wrote a book about toast. So
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, I wrote a book about toast. So things
I got
on
it
bread
somewhere. I think it's
hiding
in
around
the
there.
kitchen, or we put it down
I
on the
saw
bookshelf.
it earlier,
Yeah,
probably on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
But yeah, things on bread are really fun for me. Partly because it can be so creative. You can take a piece of
Yeah.
canvas bread, like a plain piece
Absolutely,
of bread, and
yeah.
build beautiful things
Yeah.
on it. But again, like finding things that are in season, finding things that are colorful and of the earth. And I also am obsessed. I mean, we talked about this, but I'm obsessed with mushrooms.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
like, the
yeah.
more mushrooms in your
They're
diet,
so
the
good.
better.
Yeah.
They're so powerful for the brain and the body. And things that like that can spark like creativity. Like cacao has been really powerful
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So I think just vibrant, colorful, in season, nourishing foods.
I think it's a really good point. We were talking about with the mushrooms and cacao, and this is, I guess, a way somebody could go about their food journey is just truly just learning more about food sources,
Yeah.
learning more about what is this thing that I'm eating,
Yeah.
like what is its biochemical nature, what is it known for, when is it in season, things like mushrooms, cacao, root vegetables,
Yeah.
fruits. Like if you just Google it enough or
Yeah.
find a trusted resource to learn about, like, this is what it takes for this food to be created.
Yeah.
This is what it takes for this food to survive. This is what this food does for the other food and living organisms around it.
Yeah.
Like there's a carryover.
Absolutely.
There's a carryover. So I think that's a really powerful way for someone to not only learn more things about food, but to immediately apply them and have an intention
Yeah.
and a direct mind-body connection. Certain foods will light up the brain.
Yep.
Certain foods will light up the gut. Certain foods will make you feel some kind of way. Certain foods do so many different things. And so if you can kind of work backwards, basically.
Yeah.
Like I want to really get into it. I really want to like be on. I really want to think. I mean, go for those brain healthy foods, the
Yeah.
healthy fats, like things like cacao that have all those flavonoids and polyphenols and things that just go straight up there and can actually help you think more clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also such a beautiful part of like intuitive eating.
Yeah.
Because when you know those things, when you have that knowledge in the mind, you start to feel it in the body.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily just eating to get a certain amount of protein or carbs. You're now eating in a way that's like, how can I make this thing that this body that I'm going to be in forever? How can I make it thrive?
Absolutely.
Right? Like, how can I make it feel so good
Yeah.
so that I'm thriving?
And that's exactly what I love most about where you are in your relationship and where you are in your profession and all the work that you do is just all about thriving.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very broad term, but it's specific enough for people to apply to whatever that means to them. You know,
Yeah.
it's not counting macros, it's not losing weight, gaining weight. I mean, whatever our goal is, if you just said, I want you to thrive in pursuit of that goal, I think people can really understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. And another way I think about it is like, I want you to love your life.
Yeah, yeah.
You have one life.
Yeah, truly.
You go around one
Yeah.
time on the sun, unless we believe in past lives, but one time around the sun and you want to love it. And part of that is loving the vehicle that's getting you through life, like really loving it well.
Well, that's what the show is all about. And and you know me and you know the whole purpose behind the work that I do. And so my last question for you then, Kara, is Ever forward.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
It's so good. Ever forward. Chase, I think it means that I am trusting the here, but knowing that it's bringing me forward. It's like I'm consistently right here, and it's pulling me into the future. And I think it means that I'm trusting. I'm really trusting the journey.
Yeah.
Like I'm trusting that life is happening for me.
Yeah.
And that I'm exactly where I need to be.
Yeah.
That I'm right here, right now, in this moment, in this given time, for a specific purpose. And I think Ever Forward really represents like flow for me, like getting in the river.
Yeah. That's been a theme I've picked up in our whole conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, really flowing.
Yeah. So locked in and grateful for and appreciative for and happy with the present. So much so, you know, that it's going to it has to propel you in the direction that you love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I love you.
Love you.
Guys, get her book, get her everything. Go to anything that she does. It's mind blowing. I still to this day cannot believe I've not gotten like that gold dust.
Oh my gosh, we gotta get it.
I've become obsessed with charcuterie boards. It's
I'll send
crazy.
I'll send you a bottle. It'll show up in your door next week. Just some gold dust. Put it on a cocktail.
I'm just gonna put it on everything. Yeah. But we'll have all of your information down in the show notes for everybody. But if they want to connect with you, pun intended, the most, where are you hanging out online? Where can they go?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, just at by Kara Elise. And my website is the same, bykaraelise.com. It's all at by Kara Elise.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.